Hello everyone, Teacher Luis, and in today's video we are going to be talking about the second conditional, so pay attention and let's get started. So when do we use the second conditional? So we use the second conditional when we want to talk about things that are present or future, in this case situations, that we think that are impossible or that are very unlikely to happen, okay? As usual, we're going to start with the affirmative sentences. And the structure of this one would always be, well, not always, because it can change. We start with the if, and then we add the subject. And after the subject, the verb has to go in the past simple. Then in here, when you start the sentence with the conditional clause, remember that you have to write a comma in there. And after that, you will start with the subject. In this case, you can use three different options for the modal auxiliary, okay? It can be would, it could be could, or it could be might, okay? And we saw could and might before in the modals, okay? And then the verb in the base form. So that's how you make an affirmative sentence using the second conditional. Now, there is a situation. If you want to start the sentence with the result clause and then you put the if in the second part of the sentence, then in that case you don't need to add the comma. Hello. I look different because this is a different day because sometimes I cannot finish my videos all in one sitting, but okay, let's continue with this. So these are the examples for the affirmative structure, and I put in here the two different variations in terms of the use of a comma, or depending on where we put the conditional clause. So when we have the if clause or the conditional clause, when that one comes first, we have to use the comma. So we have here three examples. If I had more money, I would buy a new car. Number two, if we spoke French, we could travel through France easily. And number three, if she studied every day, she might improve her English quickly. Now, in here, the comma is required after the if clause. Then the other option is when the main clause or the result clause comes first. And here we don't need a comma. I would travel more if I had more vacation days. He could buy that house if he earned more money. Or they might move abroad if they got the opportunity. Okay, remember in this case, we don't need the comma. Then, for the negative structure, in the second conditional, the only thing that we have to do is to use the not to make the negative or the sentencing negative. You are going to keep the same structure, if plus subject plus the past simple, and then in the second or in the result, you're going to add the not in the modal auxiliary. I would not, or you would not, or I could not, or I might not. Now, sometimes it's also possible that you will add, or you will make your conditional clause also negative, and that is also possible, right? But in here, you have to be very, very careful, because remember that when you make a negative sentence in the past, you don't use not, you use didn't, okay? So we're going to see examples of these in the other slides, okay? Let's move on with the other structures, and then we will see them with the examples. Okay, now in here we have negative sentences. And in here we have different variations, because sometimes the if clause or the conditional clause can be in negative. Sometimes it's the result clause that is going to be in negative, or sometimes both of them can be in negative. So the first example that we have is, if I didn't like my job, I would look for another one. She would help you if she didn't have a meeting.
then in these, we can see that both of the conditional clauses are in negative. Then we have the negative only in the result clause, which is also an option. If it rained tomorrow, we wouldn't go to the beach. And he wouldn't complain if the food were better. Now, another option in which we have both clauses being negative. If she didn't trust him, she wouldn't tell him her secrets, or they wouldn't be so stressed if they didn't have so many deadlines. So these are all the possibilities, okay? So keep that in mind, and also pay attention to the use of the comma, because it's also applicable in negative sentences, of course.
Okay, now for the question forms, the yes/no questions and the WH questions. So in here, we're going to start with the auxiliary for the yes/no questions. It can be would, could, or might. Then you have the subject and then the verb in the base form. Okay, and then you add the if clause, which is the if plus the subject, the subject number 2, but that doesn't mean that it's a different subject. It can be the same subject. Okay, and then the verb in the past simple. Okay, or the rest of the sentence is going to be in the past simple, because remember that the sentence that is written in simple past is the one where the if is. Okay, this is what we call the conditional clause. Why is it conditional? Because it has the if in there. It's the one that sets the condition. Then we have the WH. Remember that most of the time is going to be the same structure of the yes/no question, but we just have to add the WH at the beginning. There are some exceptions, like when we use who, because when we use who, we don't have a subject in the sentence, right? Because we're asking for the subject. Or with what. Sometimes when we have, I don't know, a very simple example in simple present. What color do you like the most? For example, in this case, we add the word color right next to the WH word. So then we have examples in here for the yes/no question. Would you help your friend if they asked you to? Look how in here we're following the would plus the subject, which is you. Help is in the base form. Then this your friend is complement, right? And then if the conditional, and then the subject they. We use they in here, and this is very important for you to know, because remember that the word friend doesn't have gender. So in here, we're asking, would you help your friend, which is in singular form, but we don't know if it is a girl or a boy. And I'm asking this in general, right? In Spanish, we would say, ayudarías a un amigo si te lo pidiera. But amigo in Spanish, because it's the way it works, you will understand that as if it is a girl or boy, it doesn't matter. But in English, we cannot say would. I mean, if you're talking specifically about a girl or boy, then you can use the subject if she asked you or if he asked you, right? But in here is a general question for any of your friends. So that's why we change it to they, okay? Then we have the second example. Would they travel more if they had more money? Look how in this second example, the subject is the same. Subject 1 is they, and subject 2 is also they, okay? And the structure is exactly like the one that is followed in the formula. Then we have the WH word questions examples. Is where would I go if I could travel anywhere? In here, The second sentence, the conditional sentence, is also using a modal auxiliary, right? And the modal auxiliary for can in past is could, right? So we use where would I go, following the structure of WH, the would, subject, and the verb in the base form, where I would go, and then if I could travel anywhere, I could travel, we will understand that as the simple past, okay? The second one says, who would you call if you had an emergency? WH, the would, the subject, which is you, and the verb in the base form, and then the conditional sentence with the subject, the verb had in the past, and an emergency, which is the complement. In here, we have other expressions that can replace the if, okay? They are still following the structure or the rules in terms of using the would and the subject in the base, the subject and the verb in the base form, and then the conditional clause in the simple past. But they are used to set more specific conditions or limits to the situation, all right? So we have expressions as long as, so long as, provided or provided that, providing that, or providing, and on condition that. Now, we have these examples in here. You would succeed as long as you worked hard. So this as long as is substituting the if, but look how the second part of the sentence is still following the simple past structure of a sentence. And the first part is using the would, okay? I would lend you the money provided that you paid me back soon, okay? That is like given the condition that that is going to happen. You will pay me back. She would accept the offer on condition that she could work remotely. There'll be, yeah, under those circumstances, she would accept. Now, these notes are important. Remember that I, he, she, and it are allowed to use the verb to be with the form or conjugation where for the conditionals, okay? So I can easily say, if I were you, I would be more careful. Or if she were an artist, she would be very famous, okay? So in these cases, they are allowed to use that form of the verb to be. So that's everything for today. Remember that you have an assignment in the Google Classroom. If you have questions, you can send them to the WhatsApp group and we will be replying to you as soon as we can. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. See you next time. Bye-bye.